Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Child Anxiety Fact Podcast. My name is Dawn Friedman, and I'm the owner of Child Anxiety Support, a membership for parents of anxious kids. I have my master's in clinical counseling and additional postgraduate training in child anxiety disorders, including exposure and response prevention and the Supportive Parenting for Anxious Childhood Emotions program, or SPACE program, which was designed by Dr. Ellie Lebowitz of the Yale Child Study Center. I'm also certified in infant-toddler mental health. FACT stands for Frequently Asked Questions, and each week I'll be answering your questions about childhood and teen anxiety. Let's get started. We've got a great question this week. In fact, I was surprised I haven't already covered it because it seems like such a terrific basic question. And that is, why does my child's anxiety make my anxiety worse? It's just such a good question, and it gives us the opportunity to do a deep dive into anxiety in general and child anxiety in particular. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's dive in. Okay, first of all, anxiety is catching, and it's meant to be. We are meant to live in community, and if something is threatening the community, like if we're all sitting around together around the fire, relaxing after a long day hunting and gathering, and a lion is creeping up on us, and one of us hears a sound and sits up all alert, the rest of us are supposed to catch their attention so that we get on high alert too. It's a safety issue. You know how sometimes you'll be sitting in your car at a red light and you turn to look at the person in the car next to you and they feel you looking and stare right back at you? We are all attuned to each other. We are sensitive to the people around us. And of course, we are most sensitive to the people to whom we are closest. And we are most sensitive to feelings of tension or anxiety or fear. Now, I've been thinking about this a lot over the past few years because things have been scary for a lot of us. Our society is more anxious right now, and it has been for some time. We catch anxiety from each other, and even if we're having a particular experience that isn't very anxious for whatever reason, we might still find ourselves being on higher alert, a little more tense lately, a bit more irritable when we go out around other people. This is one reason why I expect to field more phone calls from parents about their anxious kids during back to school time. It's not just the transition, although there's that. It's not just the greater demands of school, although there's that too. But there's also the fact that anxiety is catching and kids catch it from each other and we catch it from them. Anxiety, in other words, begets anxiety. So that's one reason why your child's anxiety makes you anxious, and that's because it's supposed to. Beyond that, there are a couple of other reasons why your child's anxiety might make you anxious, and these are super important to unpack when we're planning how we want to address their anxiety. The first is that maybe you're anxious about the same things they're anxious about. So, say your child is really worried about passing their math test. Maybe you worry about grades too. Maybe you're worried about their ability to pass the math test. Maybe when they say, I think my English teacher doesn't like me and it's going to be extra hard when they grade my essay, we start to worry that this might happen too. We might know that we're worried about the same things that they are, but we might not know it. We might be so caught up in their worry and the whining that comes with it, or their tears, or feeling like we need to answer their call for help, that we don't notice that we share their worry. We might see it actually even as a fact, like you should be worried about math. Math is scary. You should be worried your teacher doesn't like you. Earning a teacher's goodwill is very important. Because we see it as a fact, we don't recognize our own emotional response to it. And so we think their anxiety is making us anxious, but actually what it is we're reflecting their anxiety back to them, and they're reflecting our anxiety back to us. The issue is not actually that their teacher might not like them or that math is challenging for them. The issue is actually the worry. This can be especially difficult to understand if we're a perfectionist parent, because perfectionism is a symptom of anxiety. Our response to our triggered worry is to run from that worry. That is to say, your child is afraid of failing and they're running from their fear of failure. And we are also afraid of their failing. And so we also run from the idea of failure, whether or not that is a realistic fear. And then we start doubling down on the means to avoid it. So we tell them, you should study harder. You should work extra hard to get your teacher to like you. And that's one way we perpetuate the anxiety. There's another reason why we might get more anxious when our kids are anxious, and it speaks to the most common reason parents reach out to me for help. And that is that their child's anxious behavior is triggering their anxiety. People don't always recognize this as anxiety in themselves, too. They experience it as frustration, anger, overwhelm, or even discouragement. They tell me things like, I'm afraid that my child can't handle their anxiety, or I'm afraid my child's anxiety will derail them, or I'm afraid my child will be traumatized if I make them do the thing they're scared of, or even I'm afraid of my child's behavior when I push them about the thing that makes them anxious. In those cases, it's our worry, the I'm afraid part, that we need to address first. What we know about anxiety is that it's a family systems issue. The child does have anxiety. That is not the family's fault. It is not the parent's fault. It is not the child's fault. It's a fact. And what happens is that the system of the family starts to shape itself around the child's anxiety and the parent's anxiety, whether that's because the parent is catching the child's anxiety or sharing the child's anxiety or is anxious about the child's anxiety or some combination of the three. Now, it is normal and generally speaking, it is even healthy for systems to shape themselves to support its members, right? It's only an issue when the system is supporting dysfunction. And we don't always know that this is happening, that it is in fact supporting dysfunction until we look around and say, shoot, our family is really stuck. Or we realize that we ourselves are really stuck, that we are unhappy with the way things are going. And then we get the opportunity to reshape the system. Starting with the parent doesn't mean that we're blaming the parent. It means that we're acknowledging that the parent has the position and the power to adjust their own reactions and behaviors in order to adjust the system. When the system adjusts, it shifts to support the child in growing instead of keeping the child stuck. Does that make sense? So we have a system, it's supporting the way things are going, and now we need the system to change so that the demands on the child change and support more growth. And the way to change the system is to change ourselves as the parents, as the head of the system. It's big work. I won't lie. It's not easy. And it's important that the parent takes care of themselves while they're doing it. To take care of your child's anxiety means understanding where your anxiety has become part of the issue so that you can address it and so address your child's. It's one of those things where when you start to see it, you can really see it. And that makes it much easier to address it. Thank you so much for tuning in this week. If you have a question you would like me to answer on the show, please go to childanxietysupport.com/FAQ. And if you'd like to learn more about the Child Anxiety Support membership, please go to childanxietysupport.com. The membership offers courses, live events, and community to help you design a personalized program to free your family from the trap of child anxiety. I hope you'll consider subscribing to the podcast and sharing it with any friends or family who you think might find it helpful. You can get more of my child anxiety content over at Instagram, where I'm Dawn Friedman, MSED, or on Facebook at the Child Anxiety Support page. Thanks again, and have a great week.